I thought of you. 100% purpose.
There's 3, 2 outcomes.
I did that on purpose.
Good.
How's it become Well, come here.
Sure. The article that I read is fairly short. Designers are if anyone would like to take a look at it. It's by Richard Robinson, which Jeffrey Hopkins knew quite well. So let me just go ahead and read this.
It was my thesis work.
Okay. Robinson bases his critique of Madhyamaka reasoning on 2 main points. 1, Madhyamaka reasoning claims to, quote, demolish all constructive philosophical views. And 2, Nāgārjuna claims to adopt the prasanga method, which seeks only to, quote, expose self-contradictions in his opponent's arguments without making any affirmative statements about what exists. As for the former, Robinson questions why the classical philosophical contemporaries of Nāgārjuna, to which the reasonings were applied, do not consider themselves disproved. He concludes that they do not consider themselves refuted because Nāgārjuna's reasoning is sophistic. He compares the Madhyamaka process to a shell game in the following manner. Quote, its elements are few and its operations are simple, though performed at lightning speed and with great dexterity. And the very fact that he cannot quite follow each move reinforces the observer's conviction that there is a trick somewhere. The objective of this article is to identify the trick and to determine on some points whether or not it is legitimate. The method of prasanga Robinson accepts as a legitimate mode of proceeding. It is, in fact, possible to assume another's tenets for the purpose of argument. However, one's argument is only acceptable so long as one continues to make use of axioms and rules accepted by the opponent. The moment Nāgārjuna does otherwise, Robinson claims, his argument is disqualified. Robinson begins with an analysis of own being, svabhava, inherent existence, and the dichotomy of completely identical or completely different that Nāgārjuna would establish. The absence of own being is, quote, the sole thesis that Nāgārjuna wishes to prove, according to Robinson. With respect to the question of same or different, he argues that this dichotomy applies not so much to, quote, common sense issues that can be qualified by some or partly. An example of this is some fuel is burning and some is not, which he gives, but with concepts of own being and essence. So same or different is important with regard to those issues for Robinson. In his words, what pertains to part of an essence must pertain to the whole essence. A defining property is either essential or non-essential. If it is non-essential, it is not really a defining property of an essence. If it is essential, then the essence can never be devoid of the property. He agrees that inherent existence does not make sense as a concept. It is a self-contradictory idea because in order to exist, it must belong to an existent entity. It must depend on causes and conditions and so forth, while by definition it is free from causes and conditions and independent. For Robinson, the real issue is not whether or not inherent existence can be defended, but whether or not anyone was actually asserting it, given that this is obviously absurd. In examining other classical Indian philosophies and the way Nāgārjuna addresses them, Robinson begins by creating a list of axioms upon which Nāgārjuna's reasonings depend in order to determine how widely these principles were accepted by those other systems. This is crucially important, according to Robinson, for the prasanga method to maintain its claim to authority. A great deal of the remainder of Robinson's article concerns itself with how certain of these principles are not in fact consistent with classical views. One good example of this regards the relation between entity and attribute, and what Robinson calls the question of extension. In short, he claims that for Nāgārjuna, a real thing must be utterly itself without properties, otherwise it becomes two things, a possessor and the quality possessed. Therefore, there can be no extension, no diversity within oneness, and no attributes of an essence. Robinson finds fault with this position of Madhyamakas because it is not consistent with the axioms of their opponents. The Sankhya's, for example, posit the 3 gunas, strands, threads, or attributes, that are present in all phenomena, such that, quote, diversity has an intrinsic property. He accuses Nāgārjuna...
That means diversity is an intrinsic property?
Yeah, it seems to be what he was saying. He accuses Nāgārjuna of dogmatism in an attempt to avoid empirical affirmative propositions regarding the issue of illusion, which Nāgārjuna asserts with regard to the perception of arising and ceasing. He says that's illusory, of course. As he puts it, as Robinson puts it, there appears to be no way of forcing a realist opponent to concede that common sense experience is erroneous, except to examine experience and to demonstrate empirically that it is delusive. Merely citing well-known varieties of illusion does not prove the point. Robinson also considers Nāgārjuna's insistence upon the true truths to be dogmatic and irrelevant for other systems. Quote, hence Nāgārjuna departs from his avowed method, makes an existential statement about an exegetical principle, and bases his argument on an axiom not acceptable to his opponent. Robinson's conclusion is no less than a scathing indictment of the Madhyamaka trick. For him, the Madhyamaka reasoning consists of A, reading into the opponent's views a few terms which one defines for him in a self-contradictory way, and B, insisting on a small set of axioms which are at variance with common sense and not accepted in their entirety by any known philosophy.
That's right, isn't it? So what's a typical Gelukpa response to this?
He says they're playing this shell game, and like with all these tricks, and he's the one who's not getting it. He's not getting it.
He's not getting it. In what sense is he not getting it?
Well, it seems like he doesn't really understand the system very well, just thinking that they're about to trick you and giving these, with lightning speed and great dexterity, making these movements, and he's just sort of left standing in the dark.
So what about on this issue of either two things in question are entirely the same or they're entirely different? What about that? Of accuracy? Accuracy in terms of what? I mean, didn't we remember that chart we had on the board of the different types of sameness and difference? And Gelukpas themselves conventionally assert that things can be different within being one entity. Oh, where's that in Nāgārjuna? Hasn't he redefined the terms such that it's, he's made everything impossible? How can you justify defining the terms in such a way that everything is impossible? But to say that two things have to be either entirely the same or entirely different, they themselves don't follow when they speak about conventional existence. So aren't they limiting the possible answers that the opponent gives? Come on, this is, your designated independence upon mind and body. Are you the same as mind and body or different? If you're the same, then you're two. When you go to the theater, you got to buy 2 tickets. All right? If you're different, then you've got to be findable. You've got to be able to remove mind and body, and there you are. Isn't this just what Robinson was talking about?
Yeah, from his point of view.
From his point of view? So from the Gelukpa point of view, what is their defense? They themselves say that the person is designated independence upon mind and body. It's the same entity as mind and body. That term that you didn't learn in first year.
Yeah, different excellence. So.
They themselves say when they want to present the relationship between the person and the mind and body, they themselves use that. But when they talk about other systems, they don't allow for no, right? So Robinson is right on the mark. I would think it's a very interesting observation. But as I'm saying, once we recognize this, we can also go on to say, well, let's look at the terms and see if Nāgārjuna is identifying the possibility, either you are a zebra or an elephant, otherwise you don't exist. You're not a zebra, you're not an elephant, you don't exist.
So by doing that, it expects the reader or the practitioner to get to a point where it's like that.
Yes, so then you're saying this is excusable. This type,
that's a method.
yes, of idiotic extension, or delimiting of the meanings of the possibilities is suitable because you're trying to get people to a certain point. And so because it's a religion with a soteriological aim, it's all right if nonsense is employed, because nonsense is needed. Not even having the grace to give to their opponents the very possibilities that they give to themselves.
And
This sort of inconsistency and so forth, we should still label as inconsistent, and we will see that the believers are, should we call them stupid enough, to accept that the possibilities are only this, and they say, my God, I'm not a zebra, and I'm not enough, I don't exist! And the sky opens up and this...
That's fine.
This provides the opportunity for liminal experience. So you see, you justify it because everybody needs a liminal experience in order to get a hold of that basic mind unfettered by conceptuality. They're so knocked out by this that suddenly you can get a hold of your own mind in a way that you couldn't otherwise. Right? So we can say that they use illogicality, inconsistency, and the gullibility of their followers to lead them on to something better. So, given how inconsistent and foolish they are, they shouldn't be calling.
How could their opinions of other systems possibly be?
So this is as good a response that you can come up with, that the Gelukpa scholars, these great geishas and so forth, will merely say, well, now look, please don't look into this because this has a soteriological aim. And we don't want our followers to come to disbelieve this, what is patently nonsense. That's your answer. I think that Robinson's point is that the possibilities are so strictly delimited and don't allow for anything else, okay? And that's their very problem. So Robinson's exposed the dynamics. So I see. So we have to justify this by the fact of the soteriological aim. There's no logical answer. That the possibilities really are limited to, with regard to yourself and your mind and body, that they're either same or different, completely the same or completely different. I mean, there are only these two possibilities of either completely the same or completely different. Right? Isn't that how it works? You look for yourself, either it's completely the same as mind and body or completely different, isn't it? It is how it works. And the other 5 possibilities are contained within those 2. As I have written in several places. And the reasonings only of work if from the depths you are convinced that these are the only possibilities. Within the context of inherent existence, the possibilities are limited to those 2. That's, it's stunning in another sense, then inherent existence is so absurd that nobody would ever believe in it. Thus, how could the conception of inherent existence serve as the root of cyclic existence? That's then the next question, isn't it? So then you have to see, I think the fulcrum of this analysis is to see how things look in ordinary perception, how they look to be established from their own side. And that really, if things were so pointable, you know, as we imagine, like when we get angry and get particularly desirous and so forth, that if they really did exist the way they appeared, then these rules would be applicable. It's not that all possibilities are contained within these rules. These possibilities these are all the possibilities of inherent existence. And inherent existence isn't something, as Dendal Horenba says, it can't be something like a hat that you put on, you know? This is, you know, the nuts religion, which is sort of like imagining we're all elephants first. Oh, elephant, 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 elephant. And then the guru comes on and says, you are not elephants because you don't have a tusk. And everybody goes, I don't have a tusk, therefore I'm not an elephant. You know, you put something on and then you take it off. That's what Nāgārjuna looks like to Robinson, you see? The whole concept of inherent existence is not something that even occurs in common everyday life. It is not something that we perceive. It's not how things appear to us. It is not something that we assent to. Robinson thinks. Whereas for somebody for whom these reasonings work, very sensibly, if things did have their own entity, the way they seem to, then Ngōchiro Dobutante is impossible. It's impossible. The limitations would be or are this strict. And that's why these reasonings are so difficult. Is to see that, to see their applicability. For instance, that things are produced either from self, other, both, or neither. I mean, it sounds great, but you know, when the fudge person last time will say, well, come on now, other isn't just other. We're talking about others that are capable of producing the effect. And not like every other thing in the whole universe. It's, you know, it's teamed up with the effect in the sense that it has the capacity to prove it. Now, is the answer just a matter of trying to cram, you know, some idiotic view down the person's throat? Or does it make sense that once it's other, by way of its, you know, inherently other, it can't be any different from anything else that's other? But do we see things that way? Now, one thing Tsongkhapa points out is we don't view the relationship between mind, body, and oneself as either same or different. This is unanalyzed. We just think there's mind, there's body, there's self. And you don't think, well, you know, if you did think they either have to be one or different, you might go up to the window at the theater and say, give me 2 tickets. And they say, oh, there's only one person, but now I got mind and body. Really? You see, it's unanalyzed. Innate perceptions are unanalyzed. So the claim is not that innately we misperceive ourselves as one with mind and body, or as completely different from mind and body. That isn't the claim. The claim is that if things existed the way they appear, then logically they would have to be either the same or different. And if you can buy into that logic, meaning really if you can understand that logic, but buy into in the sense of, well, like for you two, the production from self, other, both, and neither means something. I mean, that's what I mean by buy into. Where you can see that those 4 are crucial crucial. Like, I'm not going to go on believing this unless I can work it out. Whereas with some of the reasons, certainly, you don't even care. Well, there are some that just wouldn't strike you as, like, who cares? Okay? But others that you really feel were crucial. So if we can get to the point where deciding, you see, whether the self, oneself, is one with mind and body, or it's different from mind and body, you get to the point where it's crucial. I'm just not going to go on believing in this thing unless I can decide this, you see? Now, what is it about the appearance of things and the way we take them that would convince you that it was all right to delimit the possibilities this way? You see? You have to see the connection between how things appear and the reasonings. Otherwise, and so forth. You have to see that things appear in such a substantial way that indeed, you know, like when you point, oh, I bought a new laptop the other day. And where did I leave it in the house? I just moved it to a place where people couldn't see it through the double doors, all right? So I know where it is. It's, and there's the laptop that covers that spot. And so it's a matter, I think, you see, I think this is the crux of it, of getting down to that level of experience, of raw experience. And to see that there is this inherent existence that may look like a hat being put on and then just, prasanga tenets. Oh yes, we hope all prasanga tenets, which means you're just removing this extra thing that you put on. It'd be ridiculous. It's like many people say, to conceive of inherent existence is to conceive that objects are unchanging. What's wrong with that? Is the conception of inherent existence the conception that an object doesn't change? So, to conceive of objects to be inherently existent is to conceive that they're permanent and, what did he say? Independent. Independent of what? Causes and conditions. Right. So, do you conceive of this table as being permanent and independent of causes and conditions?
If I think about it at all, no.
Yes, right. So that means you don't conceive of it at those times to be inherently existent. Congratulations. You've achieved quite a high level through this simple path. So then, do proponents of Hinayana tenets realize, proponent means you've actually developed a view. Do they realize that something like this watch changes? They realize subtle impermanence. Therefore, they don't conceive of objects to be inherently existent. Speaking from a prasangic viewpoint.
They would not overcome.
Well, they wouldn't. Oh, so then, therefore, what you said is entirely wrong. Right? Entirely. A consequence of something's being inherently existent is that it couldn't change, right? Wouldn't depend on anything. But to conceive of it to be inherently existent can't merely be to conceive that it is permanent, doesn't change. It's independent. Your object of negation is too narrow. So you see, it's within the context of inherent existence. Inherent existence means, well, one way of putting it is that the object covers its basis of designation. Merely that. Press down. 다시 고사는 메소도 now, appearing in the manner of covering the basis of designation.
Is that findability in general?
There's a question of whether to conceive of an object to be findable among its basis of designation, whether that is really a conception of inherent existence. If you can't find it among or separate from the base of designation, it doesn't inherently exist. But is the conception that an object is analytically findable innate? I tend to think it is. There's debate on this. If you said findable within the 7 possibilities, that's artificial. But findable upon analysis, so what one point says, it's with regard to Swatantra, that the object of negation, it's very odd statement. That a thing that could stand analysis. Wow, it's like a very inviting possibility to say that the conception of inherent existence is just to conceive that this could bear analysis into it. You know, it's not a figment of my imagination. It really is there. And at some point he says, it's not. Some people explain this away and say, well, what he meant is able to bear analysis in the 7 ways. That wouldn't be innate. Hard.
This might be too narrow, so.
Might be too narrow. He himself says, once, and he prefers terms like reminiscences. Noam Belden and Pamunga use this kind of vocabulary. Dachi nube tsuldu nawa. Dachi nube tsuldu truba. Established in the manner of covering its basis of designation. That what I'm saying is, when you see that you do perceive objects this way, we had the term zubu zusa, zubu finger, zusa is the place that is pointed at, zubu zusa. That there's something, you know, quite definite that you're pointing to there. When your mind gets, when you can get a hold of that, then you can see if it did exist in the way it appears. Now that the trugna. Now that the trugna. Established in the way it appears. That if it were established in the way it appears, then it would have its thing, and like mind and body would have to have its thing, their thing. But that doesn't mean that I'm already conceiving it to exist separately from mind and body. Do you follow? That's a logical extension, that if it did exist this way, then it would have to be either the same as mind and body, which are there. After you'd say, oh, it's mine. A lot of Buddhists say it's mine. Or something entirely separate from it. If it did exist the way it appears. So the justification for the delimitation of the possibilities is that we're talking about inherent existence. Now, for that to be sensible, inherent existence has to be something that we are living in the midst of, right? And then I make the sort of further appeal, that is a very palpable experience to to see that that things already do appear to us to be so concrete. But maybe that's where, that this is where I make the jump. And I'm saying that that you can say, oh yes, if things that did exist so solidly, yes, these would be the possibilities, but I don't conceive of things to exist so solidly. For me, the world is just marvelously fluid. It's fluid, it's jumping all over the place. I can't stand it. I wish it were a little bit more like this inherent existence that you're claiming that I already assert. Okay? You see that this inherent existence isn't part of my experience. So that's the defense. You see that the topic is inherent existence. There are other possibilities. Within unfindable conventional existence, there are other possibilities. But within the way things are appearing, if they appeared that way, then they'll be limited to these possibilities. And in that way, it's then not a shocking. Robinson, I think, truly did see that it's true, possibilities are being delimited to nutty possibilities, such that it's like elephant and zebra. Nothing's possible. He truly did. But he didn't see any connection to the way he was seeing it. I think more that, in the reasonings that we were talking about at the beginning of the course, when you're moving, you've got those three possibilities. Those really look like the only possibilities. Conventionally, ultimately, whatever way you want to look at it, those look like the only possibilities. He didn't seem to do a thorough study of all of the, 27 chapters in many different ways, many different types of analyses, and then list the ones that appeared to be utterly idiotic, the ones that were semi-idiotic, and others that were barely idiotic, and others that, well, gee, maybe. For this to have a liberative function, the person has to put it into practice. The only way it can be put into practice is eventually to see, I do see things that way. And I said eventually, quite carefully, because you can begin to see it by applying the reasonings. You don't necessarily have to see it beforehand. Begin applying the reasonings, searching this way, that way, and so forth. Maybe after a couple of years, you'll see, wow, this really is applicable. So yes, a person would have to become convinced. I can remember in Wisconsin, was actually living with Robinson out on the farm. He left his wife, and he had a few months before he moved in with his girlfriend, who was coming back from Canada. And he showed up in my little tiny room. Really, it was maybe 7 feet by 7 feet, literally. When I moved back the chair from the tiny desk, it would hit the bed, which was on the floor. And there wasn't a foot beyond the bed to the window. There was a closet off the room. And so it's probably 6 by 7. And Robinson's a big man. And he opens the door and he realizes he can't fit into the room. So he stands at the door. He says, Jeff, do you want to get a place? He was that sort of direct. And I thought, this place for what? Within 24 hours, because we're both sort of manipulators. We had a place, we had a llama coming, we had 5 or 6 students signed up to live there, and we had it all. Anyway, I was talking to a fellow in Madison, and the fellow, there's always people who hate you, just from first sight. It's just like, anyway, this guy, was giving me a hard time. And in the center of my heart, it was like, it was cubular. I started screaming on the telephone. And at the same time, I was watching this cubular thing as I went on screaming and screaming, and I was watching it at the same time. And really crazy. Look at that thing. It's like it had sides to it, And that was this self that was under attack, that was so pure that couldn't possibly have any of these qualities that he was attributing to. So I don't think it has to be that, the first step in meditating on emptiness is to get a hold of the object of negation. So it's said. But it's more like chicken and the egg. You meditate, you get a hold of the object of negation a little, then you don't, and it goes on. It goes on, and you go through the possibilities some, and then some event happens someday. Like you bump into the door in the middle of the night, and your self forms there, and you watch it. And you watch it because you've heard about this sort of thing, and you've been analyzing to see, is it like this, like that, so forth. And it's with something that is that solid. This is like solid beyond solid. This is, artificial conception of self, to the extreme. But obviously then it was something I needed to deal with. And got in mind something that I need to deal with. So maybe because of his tendency, especially during that period, people were looking at Madhyamaka reasoning as logic devoid of spiritual intent, and Indians even today quite often will say, well, even without the religious aims, we really have something here. Or if you disregard the religious aims, we really have something, as if this will make it accord with what they think about Western science. And thus, Fred Strang's book, The Religious Significance, Emptiness, Its Religious Significance, because that was the milieu in which he was living, where it had no religious significance. Robinson was Buddhist, and but perhaps lacking, wherever it comes from, some sort of conviction, faith. This is like the faith that somebody who's going to teach you French is capable of doing so you're willing to do what the person says. It's just ordinary faith. Lacking that sort of ordinary faith that, well, maybe it does make sense. But he really did see this idiotic delimitation of the possibilities. And it is idiotic. Except that we live in the claim anyway, is that we live in the midst of such idiocy where these rules have to apply. Thus, it's very important to know the other types of sameness and difference that there are. Even to make you see how idiotic these are. In the process of appreciating how this strict delimitation does apply, that we are this substantialist, even when we claim, you see, that we're not. Nobody wants to be substantialist nowadays. And so many people think that they aren't. Until you step on their toe or take the piece of chocolate cake before they got to it, right? Take your parking place just as you find it. Robinson was great. He was, but I imagined him, how, some people, at that time there was just beginning these fast reading programs. People go speed reading, and they couldn't get the pages over fast enough. Robinson was the kind of guy who could read the book this way. Didn't have to turn the pages. It was like white light. And he loved to argue. He loved, so many people hated him. And he'd make a mess out of everything. And he would, and he felt his students had to kill him. Because his father he was big, his father was smaller. And probably because of his size, his father was a complete son of a bitch. And Robinson hated his father. I just came to terms with it by understanding he had to kill his father, so to speak. And I just met his father at Robinson's funeral. And when he came to the funeral. And Robinson felt that about his graduate students, that you had to fight and kill. And he wasn't going to make it easy for you. You had to kill. And
somebody finally get to him?
Oh, he loved it when you got it. Oh, when you got it, he wanted you to kill him. He wanted you. I mean, this is what he saw as the contract. And I was studying about Alaya Vijnana, some of his work that Gareth Sparham was translating and published. And in that, there's a section on Paramartha, some Chinese views on Alaya Vijnana. Chinese Buddhism is his field, Tibetan Buddhism my field. And we were walking along, and he said something about Paramartha, and I corrected. And then he said something else, I corrected immediately. It went 3 times, and that was it. We were then equals. No fights, no challenges. Very interesting. It was like something snapped, and he was just like marshmallow from there on in. That's interesting. And that was when I killed him.
Did he read Tibetan?
Yes, 10 languages. And I was picking up Vietnamese a little on the side. He used to blast out at people corrections. Somebody would say, Madhyamaka, and he'd say, Madhyamaka! And over Thanksgiving dinner once at this house, and still living with his wife, he, corrected somebody's Sanskrit, or he was about to, but I mimicked him. And then he didn't correct after that. And I felt really bad about that, because it's very helpful to have somebody around who's going to correct your Sanskrit. It's quite neat. Anyway, so we didn't get to your questions. So, next time. This is Kozort's thesis, these two. And I understood how we can do this. If all of you would please read pages 2 to 43, which is the introduction. And then, what we'll do, there are 3 sections. He explains some of the uncommon features, then Jayasheva does, and then Jangya. He meaning Kozort does a few of them. What I thought to do was just take Jayasheva because he's the most thorough. The Jayasheva text has within it Ngawang Belden's commentary. Don't get confused. Don't worry. Mix the two in your mind. Don't make any difference. And it'll say Jayasheva or Ngawang Belden just go on reading. Noam Belden is filling in. Giant Shape is too brief, much too brief, unbearable. It's like a 350-page telegram. Literally awful. The style is terrible. His other books are not written this way. They're not. They're quite clear. He's looking at the telegram. He's doing something on about it. So, since we said there are 11 chapters and 16 unique tenets. Some have 2 in them. So, I think, because we now have 2 classes to do this in, this is the assignment for next time and the time after. But what I'm saying is begin now and write them up, and it may take only a paragraph or 2 on each one. Don't make it, don't repeat everything that's said, right? And present it in some comprehensible way. It's not that hard. You with me? And if you want to look back at what Kozort said or forward at what Jangya says, fine. But Giant Sheba and Noam Belden are enough. And that way we'll cover the whole book.